The city was a graveyard of ambition, but tonight, Lord Kaelen Volkov only saw a nuisance. Rain slicked the Gothic gargoyles of his ancestral estate, and the monotony of his existence was an armor heavier than his Italian leather coat. He stalked the rooftops, his movements liquid darkness, his mind 1,000 years old and utterly bored. His thirst was a low, constant hum, easily satiated. Tonight's selection was a simple one. A young woman leaving a late-night study session, her fear already a sweet, metallic scent on the wind. Kaelen landed silently in the alley, his crimson eyes locking onto his prey. Elara Vance clutched her worn textbook, the cold seeping through her thin jacket. She felt the shadow before she saw it, a sudden absolute drop in the air's temperature, a presence so dominant it stole her breath. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She simply looked up into the cruel, chiseled face of the thing that was about to end her. Kaelen saw her clearly, unremarkable, but with eyes that held a defiant, startling clarity. He moved. 1 second he was a statue of darkness, the next he was caging her against the cold brick, his hand a vice around her throat. A single whisper and you'll cease to be, his voice was a low velvet rasp, a promise and a threat intertwined. He bent his head, his fangs extending with a faint, dreadful snick. The moment he pierced her skin, the predictable script of his night shattered. It was not the cool, calm flow of mortal blood he was accustomed to. It was fire. The moment the blood touched his tongue, it felt like molten gold had flooded his veins. It wasn't pain but a terrifying, brilliant pleasure that ripped through his ancient soul. His eyes snapped wide open, flashing with genuine, unbridled shock for the first time in centuries. It burns, a primal voice screamed in his mind, but it sustains. The blood was alive, incandescent, coursing with an energy that felt simultaneously divine and destructive. He felt a forgotten part of him, the beast, the addict, waken roaring for more. He was supposed to take only enough to quell his hunger, but he couldn't stop. The flavor was a symphony of spice and heat, a terrifying, beautiful addiction taking root in the deep, desolate parts of his immortality. Elara gasped, not from the pain of the bite, but from the sudden, scorching sensation that exploded from her neck and spread throughout her body. Where his lips touched her, her skin began to glow faintly, an unnatural orange-red light flickering just beneath the surface. Her eyes, wide with terror, now held 2 pinpricks of pure, brilliant gold. What are you? Kaelen finally tore his lips away, staggering back. His own lips were smeared with a blood that was almost glowing in the dark alley. His reflection, usually composed, was a mask of savage, desperate desire. The veins beneath his eyes pulsed with a frightening orange-tinged luminosity. Elara slumped against the wall, her mind reeling. She felt empty, yet paradoxically filled with a vibrant, dizzying heat. She stared at him, not with the expected paralyzing fear, but with a strange, nascent feeling of power that she had never known. Kaelen looked down at his hand, which trembled, a motion unheard of for him. He was supposed to leave her for dead, or at least leave her with a clean, forgettable scar. But he couldn't. His very existence now hinged on this woman. His ancient curse, dormant for centuries, felt the jolt of this unique blood, and now, it demanded its source. He took one decisive, terrifying step toward her, his voice low and utterly devoid of his previous boredom. It held a dangerous, possessive intensity. "You are mine now, little fire," he growled, the words a decree. He scooped her up, she was shockingly light, and vanished into the night, the alley left empty save for the scent of ozone and the lingering ghost of heat. Elara Vance was no longer a simple student. She was the vessel of the Incandescence, and Lord Kaelen Volkov was no longer just a vampire. He was her captive, bound by a thirst that would not be slaked, only consumed. The fire in her veins had just ignited the war for his soul. The air in the stone manor was thick and ancient, carrying the faint, cold scent of dust and power. Lord Kaelen Volkov set Elara down roughly on a massive 4-poster bed draped in crimson velvet. The room was immense, lit only by tall, flickering candelabers that cast dancing shadows across the Gothic archways. Elara's head spun. The agonizing burn in her neck had subsided, replaced by a strange, humming energy that settled deep in her bones. She pushed herself up, her hand flying to the bite marks. There was no blood, only 2 perfectly clean, terrifying punctures. Kaelen stood across the room, his back to her, rigid and silent. He was struggling, she realized. Not with her, but with an internal battle that made his shoulders tight and his fists clench and unclench. "Why am I here?" she finally whispered, her voice weak but steadying. Kaelen turned, his gaze heavy and possessive. The orange glow that had briefly pulsed beneath his skin was gone, replaced by the familiar cold crimson of his vampire eyes, but the raw hunger in them was intensified. Because you are dangerous, he stated, his voice a low, lethal purr. And because I cannot afford to let you leave. Dangerous? I'm just a student. You're the one who. You are not just anything, Elara Vance, he cut her off, taking a deliberate, slow step towards her. Your blood, it is unlike anything in this world. It is fire. It is life. It is, to my kind, a fatal intoxication. He stopped at the foot of the bed, leaning in, his intense gaze pinning her. I have not felt true thirst in centuries. But the moment I tasted your incandescence, every primal instinct I possess woke up, screaming for more. You are not a meal, you are an addiction. And I am breaking every law of my existence to keep my addiction close. Elara felt a shiver travel through her, a mixture of fear and a horrifying magnetic pull. So you've kidnapped me? I have secured my survival, Kaelen corrected, his jaw tight. If I let you go, I will be compelled to find you again, and next time, I may not stop drinking until your heart turns to ash. You must remain here, contained, until I understand what you are and how to counteract this curse you've brought upon me. A shadow moved in the doorway. It was a woman, tall and powerfully built, with dark, severe features and eyes as cold and calculating as a winter moon. This was Serafina, Kaelen's loyal lieutenant. My lord, Serafina's voice was laced with disapproval as she eyed Elara with unconcealed suspicion. She is a volatile variable. Keeping a mortal with such a volatile essence within the manor walls is folly. It attracts attention. Attention I can handle, Kaelen dismissed her with a wave of his hand. Send word to the Elder Council that I am indisposed. No one is to approach this quadrant of the estate. Serafina, you will guard the lower levels. No one, absolutely no one gets in. Serafina bowed stiffly, her resentment clear, and vanished. Elara watched the exchange, realizing the terrifying magnitude of her situation. She wasn't just Kaelen's prisoner, she was his secret and a threat to his entire existence. If you truly want to save yourself, Kaelen, Elara said, trying to infuse her voice with a strength she didn't feel, then let me go. I'm telling you I'm nobody. The fire. I've never felt it before tonight. Kaelen let out a short, cynical laugh. Innocence is a luxury neither of us can afford. That fire is now a part of me, a deep, gnawing need. And I will not risk the end of my line for your comfort. He pulled a heavy, ornate key from his pocket. This room will be your cage. There is food, water, and everything you need. Do not attempt to leave. Do not attempt to scream. Because if you force me to touch you again without preparation, Elara, the outcome will be far more permanent than a simple bite. He walked towards the door, his long coat sweeping behind him. He paused with his hand on the handle, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly as he looked back at her. Rest. We have much to discuss. Once I've managed to subdue the screaming hunger you've gifted me. The heavy oak door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the vast room, and the key turned with a harsh, definitive click. Elara was alone, the silence heavy and suffocating. She looked at the luxurious cage around her, then down at her hands, still faintly tingling with a residual forbidden heat. She was a simple student, a book lover, and now, a vessel of fire, locked in a vampire lord's castle, the source of his obsession. Her new life had just begun, bounded by stone and an agonizing mutual need. Elara woke with a scream caught in her throat. The dream was vivid and scorching, a flash of obsidian wings, a taste of metallic heat, and a searing pain that wasn't physical but elemental. Her skin felt too tight, humming faintly like an overloaded wire. She was still in the velvet-draped cage, but the night had given way to a weak, gothic dawn filtering through the tall, arched windows. A heavy tray of food sat on a mahogany side table, rich fruits, fresh bread, and a silver pitcher of water. Kaelen was nothing if not meticulous in his captivity. She had no appetite, the internal burn of far more demanding hunger. The door creaked open and Serafina entered, carrying a stack of ancient leather-bound books. She moved with a warrior's grace, her expression unchangingly cold. She placed the books on a heavy writing desk and ignored Elara. He sent you to babysit? Elara asked, trying to sound defiant despite the pounding in her chest. Serafina did not look up. Lord Kaelen commands, I obey. However, understand this, Incandescent. I'm not your maid. I am here to monitor your volatility. Incandescent? Elara repeated, the word sounding strange and monumental. What does that even mean? Serafina finally raised her eyes, and there was a flicker of something raw and ancestral in their depth. It means you are carrying a cursed, forgotten power. The old blood speaks of it, a rare, chaotic essence that binds itself to a pure mortal host. It's a flame that consumes everything it touches. And you, little mortal, are the wick. She approached Elara, her movements slow and threatening. Lord Kaelen believes you are the solution to his ailment. He has a weakness, a compulsion tied to an ancient curse of his lineage. But I see what you really are, a threat. Your blood doesn't just feed him, it stirs the ancient darkness within him, an aspect he has fought to control for centuries. It gives him strength, yes, but at the cost of his control, his very sanity. I don't want this power, Elara pleaded, holding her hands up. I don't even know how to use it. Ignorance is not innocence here, Seraphina countered, tapping the spine of a massive tome. Kaelen is currently submerged in these texts, trying to find a counteragent, or perhaps a means to simply dominate your essence. He is battling an addict's thirst. And you are his drug. Suddenly, Elara felt a spike of frustration, at Kaelen's arrogance, at Seraphina's judgment, at the terrifying, fiery prison her own body had become. She slammed her hand down on the mattress. A sharp, searing pain shot up her arm. The air around the bed shimmered, and a patch of the heavy velvet coverlet where her hand lay instantly smoldered and turned to ash. A faint, metallic scent of burned linen filled the air. Elara stared at the charred patch, her eyes wide with horror. Her hand was fine, yet the velvet had been utterly destroyed by a heat that had lasted less than a second. Seraphina, for the first time, showed genuine alarm. She took a quick step back, her hand flying to the dagger tucked into her waistband. See? Seraphina hissed, her voice tight. That is the incandescence. Uncontrolled, it will not just kill him, it will incinerate you from the inside out. Your life force is rapidly transforming. You are shedding your mortality for raw, destructive power. You are becoming a beacon. A beacon for what? Elara whispered, terrified to move her hand. Just as Seraphina was about to speak, a low, rhythmic thump sounded from the wall opposite the windows, almost lost in the silence of the manor. It was a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like heavy boots moving across dry leaves. Seraphina's eyes narrowed. She wasn't focused on Elara anymore, she was focused on the silence outside. Trouble, she murmured, a single word laden with centuries of caution. Someone is probing the perimeter. Too quiet for a rival clan. Too persistent for a stray. She looked back at Elara, her warning severe. I must go. But understand this, outside these walls, there are those who hunt not just vampires but the source of chaos, the incandescent. They can feel the heat you radiate. If they find you before Kaelen can tame you, they will extinguish your fire permanently. And they will not be gentle. Seraphina spun on her heel and was gone, leaving Elara alone once more. Elara looked from the closed door to the smoldering patch on the velvet, then toward the windows where the quiet thump seemed to be getting closer. The terror of Kaelen's obsession was suddenly overshadowed by a cold, dread fear of the unknown, the shadow hunter Seraphina warned of. She was no longer just Kaelen's prisoner, she was a lure, a weapon, and a rapidly ticking time bomb. Marcus Thorne knelt in the mud, his movements as economical and silent as a closing trap. He wasn't a vampire, yet the night offered him no less comfort than it did the bloodsuckers he hunted. He wore hardened leather, not to ward off bullets but claws, and the long silver filigreed stakes strapped across his back were for more than mere show. They were instruments of absolute finality. He had been tracking the residue of chaotic energy for 3 days. It was a searing, chemical smell to him, one he hadn't detected since the Great Purge decades ago, the scent of incandescence. It felt like a wildfire raging beneath the earth, and it led him straight to the ancient, heavily shielded Volkov manor. Kaelen Volkov. Thorne knew the lord by reputation. A predator of meticulous cruelty, too powerful, too established. The fact that the vampire was hoarding an incandescent was either a sign of utter madness or a desperate need. Thorne pulled a small silver compass from his pocket. It didn't point north, it shivered violently, its needle fixed on a point high within the manor's central tower. The incandescent was powerful but clearly uncontrolled. The spike of energy he'd felt 2 hours ago, a sudden sharp pulse of heat, was unmistakable. He took cover behind a crumbling stone fountain, scanning the perimeter. The standard magical wards were intact, but they were strained, struggling to contain the internal power source. Then he saw her, Seraphina, Kaelen's second in command, moving quickly across the inner courtyard, her posture alert and stressed. They are panicking, Thorne thought, a cold satisfaction settling in his gut. His sole purpose was simple: extermination. Incandescents were not gods or saviors, they were catastrophic anomalies that burned out everything, vampires, humans, and the delicate balance between the two worlds. His family had learned this lesson in fire and ruin. He didn't believe in saving the vessel. He believed in removing the threat. Thorn activated a device on his wrist, a tiny emitter that sent a low resonant frequency into the earth. It was a crude, mortal tool designed to disrupt supernatural wards. He didn't expect it to breach Kaelen's defenses, only to send a clear message: I am here. I see what you are hiding. Inside the manor, in the velvet prison, Elara flinched. The humming energy in her chest intensified, vibrating unpleasantly, like a dentist's drill against bone. She heard a faint high-pitched whine that made the fragile glass of the room's window panes tremble. In the lower study, surrounded by tomes, Kaelen felt the intrusion instantly. It wasn't a breach but a probe. A deliberate, insolent declaration. His crimson eyes narrowed and a guttural snarl escaped his throat. Hunter, he breathed the word, a venomous curse. He slammed shut the book he was reading, a treatise on magical containment, and raced up the stairs towards Elara's room. Serafina met him halfway, her face etched with grim realization. It's a shadow hunter, my lord. I felt the pulse. They are using an anti-magic spike. He knows what she is. He won't touch her, Kaelen hissed, his protective fury overriding his calculated terror. This mortal is not his to judge. He will not stop until the fire is extinguished, Kaelen, Serafina warned. Incandescents are forbidden. You are violating the ancient truce by keeping her. Kaelen ignored her, throwing open the door to Elara's room. Elara was standing by the window, her body tense, staring at the unseen source of the unsettling vibration. The air around her was faintly warmer. What was that? She demanded. A reminder, Kaelen said, his voice clipped, his urgency terrifying. A reminder that the world is much more dangerous than a simple vampire lord with a thirst problem. There is a man outside. A hunter. He doesn't want to drink your blood, Elara. He wants to burn you. He moved to the window, his form a dark silhouette against the pale light. He looked out into the shrouded grounds, knowing exactly where the hunter was hiding. We have to move you, Kaelen decided, his plan forming instantly. The wards are strained. He will try to flush you out. Move me where? To another cage? Elara's fear was quickly turning to anger. Kaelen grabbed her arm, his grip hard but not cruel. To a place even the shadow hunters dare not tread. The deeper sanctum. But first, you must learn something critical about your situation, Elara. You are not just fire, you are a key. And the lock is my own dark history. He pulled her towards a hidden door disguised as a bookcase, his breath close to her ear. The low, rhythmic thump from outside suddenly ceased, replaced by a sudden, absolute silence. A deadly silence. He's coming, Kaelen stated. And he's coming fast. Kaelen didn't hesitate. He shoved the heavy bookcase aside with impossible vampire strength, revealing a dark, narrow passage lined with rough-hewn stone. The air that rushed out was cold and smelled strongly of iron and forgotten things. Now, he commanded, pulling Elara into the darkness. Where are we going? Elara stumbled, the cold shock of the air against her skin. Underneath. To the vault of lineage, Kaelen replied, his voice a low rumble in the tight space. It's shielded by layers of earth and ancient power. Even the hunter's spike won't penetrate it easily. As they descended, Kaelen's hand remained locked on her arm, his touch oddly reassuring amidst the fear. The tunnel was long, winding downward into the earth's silence. When they finally emerged, they were in a vast, circular chamber. The walls were covered in intricate carvings that depicted the history of Kaelen's line, the Volkov vampires, scenes of battles, ancient oaths, and shadowy figures ruling over desolate lands. In the center of the chamber, a single, obsidian sarcophagus rested on a raised dais. It was large and unsettlingly pristine. Kaelen released Elara's arm and walked towards the dais, his eyes fixed on the carvings. The hunter is seeking you because of the incandescence, Kaelen began, his tone measured and serious. But he and my own kind, they don't understand the full picture. My obsession with your fire isn't just about the addictive power it gives me. It's about a curse. Elara slowly approached him, drawn by the intensity of his confession. What curse? He ran a gloved finger over a specific carving, the image of a powerful ancient vampire being chained by swirling shadows. Centuries ago, an ancestor of mine, a Volkov elder, betrayed a powerful sorceress. Her dying act was to bind our line. She decreed that every direct male heir, myself included, would be afflicted with a terminal consumption. A slow, painful decline that only the rarest of elemental energies could delay. He turned to face her, his expression a mask of chilling despair. For the last 500 years, I have survived on diluted ritualistic magic, buying myself decades, sometimes mere years. But the curse progresses. My strength fades. I am dying, Elara. Slowly, relentlessly. Elara's breath hitched. A dying vampire lord. The irony was a cold dagger in her gut. And my blood? Your blood isn't just fire. It's a perfect antidote, Kaelen admitted, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The incandescence is the raw elemental chaos needed to counter the specific shadow magic of the curse. The first sip I took, it didn't just satisfy my hunger, it healed a part of the decay. It made me stronger than I've been in centuries. He paused, and the weight of his next words settled heavily in the air. My desire for you is monstrously selfish. I don't just want your blood, Elara. I need it to live. You are my sustenance, my salvation, and the key to reversing my impending death. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, his thumb brushing dangerously close to the twin marks on her neck. This is the true secret. I keep you locked away not just to protect you from the world but to protect you from myself. I will die without you. Elara looked into his red eyes, seeing past the terrifying vampire to the terrified man admitting his fatal flaw. It was an appalling truth, one that bound them with hooks of absolute desperation. You said I'm safe here, Elara whispered, looking at the silent sarcophagus. What is that? Kaelen's face darkened, the brief moment of vulnerability vanishing. That is the ultimate truth of the Volkov line. It is empty now, but it is waiting. It is where I must eventually rest when the curse finally claims me. It is also the failsafe. If I were to ever lose control completely, if the incandescence were to drive me fully mad, Serafina has orders to lock me in there. He walked away from her, towards a smaller, intricately carved box near the wall. But we are not there yet. I intend to live. And to do that, I need to know your power and you need to know mine. He opened the box and pulled out a small antique silver needle. Elara recoiled instantly. What are you doing? This is the lie, Elara. The essential, necessary lie, Kaelen said, his eyes hard and unwavering. The hunter is outside, closing in. My clan elders are waiting for a mistake. They will ask questions. You are terrified, you are confused, and you will eventually try to leave. He quickly closed the distance between them. Before Elara could react, he plunged the needle gently into her fingertip. A single, perfect bead of her glowing, incandescent blood welled up. Drink this, he commanded, holding the fingertip to her lips. What? It contains a tiny fraction of my own blood and a simple compulsion charm. When you drink it, you will feel protected by me. More than that, you will believe that this is exactly where you are meant to be. It will keep you calm, keep you quiet, and most importantly, keep you from running toward a death the hunter is eagerly waiting to deliver. Elara stared at the drop of blood on her fingertip, then at Kaelen's demanding, desperate eyes. He was offering comfort, security, and safety, all wrapped in a package of absolute control and first betrayal. Hesitantly, she licked the single, metallic and slightly warm drop. A wave of serene calm washed over her, replacing the sharp edges of her fear. She looked at Kaelen, and for the first time she saw not a monster but a powerful, flawed protector. I won't run, she said, the words feeling true, even as a tiny, rational part of her mind screamed the opposite. Kaelen's face softened in relief, a relief that was terrifying in its intensity. He hadn't saved her from the hunter. He had secured his addiction. He had won the first round of the war for her will. Good, he breathed, pressing her forehead gently against his. Now we wait for the enemy to make the next move. The vault of lineage was a chamber of cold dread, yet Elara felt a disturbing sense of peace. The compulsion charm Kaelen had introduced into her blood worked insidiously well, coating her fear in a warm, compliant lacquer. She watched Kaelen now, not with terror, but with a detached curiosity, as he pored over the ancient Volkov texts. He had sequestered them in the chamber's deepest recess, surrounded by a faint, metallic scent that kept the worst of his thirst at bay. He had not drunk from her since the charm, relying on his dwindling reserves, his focus purely on understanding her incandescence. The term is older than my clan, Kaelen finally muttered, pushing a scroll of desiccated hide across the stone table. It refers to a primal elementalist, a mortal soul bound to an energy too pure for this realm. It is not magic, it is raw, chaotic creation. Elara read the archaic script. It described incandescence as being chosen by the heart of the world, during times of great imbalance, capable of channeling energy that could both create life and obliterate mountains. But why me? She asked, the question laced with the calm that wasn't truly her own. The texts offer conjecture, Kaelen replied, circling the table. They say the host, you, must possess a specific type of purity or resilience to survive the binding. And the power itself manifests strongest when the host is under extreme emotional duress. He pointed to an illustration, a figure wreathed in fire, eyes blazing, holding a vampire in a chokehold. The legend states that the only entity capable of drawing the incandescence out of its dormant state is an ancient predator, a being whose power is so cold, it forces the chaotic heat to ignite. A vampire. Specifically, my bloodline, cursed with the specific shadow magic, was the perfect catalyst. Elara stared at the image, a cold premonition settling in. So, I'm not an accident. I was activated by your bite. Precisely, Kaelen confirmed. And that is why the hunter is so close. Uncontrolled incandescence creates destabilizing ripples in the magical world. It's a flare, Elara. And it's drawing every desperate entity to us. He noticed her gaze drift to the obsidian sarcophagus. Don't dwell on that. We need to focus on control. My research suggests two possibilities. Either the host is ritually drained until the element fades, which would kill you, or the host learns to contain the fire. To become the master of the incandescence, not just its vessel. He moved closer, his proximity sparking a residual heat in her skin that momentarily fought the charm's influence. I need you to try and summon the fire. Not fear it. Command it. Elara hesitated, remembering the smoldering velvet. I can't. Just happens. Kaelen knelt before her, his intensity absolute. You must. The hunter will breach the manor soon, Serafina cannot hold him forever. You need to defend yourself. Close your eyes. Don't think of anger or fear. Think of need. Think of the single thing you desperately want to protect. Elara closed her eyes. She tried to think of home, of her old life, but the images were hazy. The charm made her desires simple and singular. Kaelen's safety, Kaelen's presence. She pushed the thought into the terrifying humming space in her chest. Protection. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a gradual, brilliant ignition. The air around her grew searingly hot. The copper smell of raw power filled the vault. When she opened her eyes, Kaelen gasped, retreating a step. Her skin wasn't just glowing, it was cracked with golden-orange lines, like lava beneath drying earth. Her hair seemed to float on an invisible heat current. Now touch the stone, Kaelen commanded, his voice tight with controlled awe. Elara tentatively touched the nearest stone carving. The incandescence obeyed her thought. Heat but contained. The stone didn't burn. Instead, the carving glowed with a golden light, and when she pulled her hand away, the stone remained warm, infused with energy. Magnificent, Kaelen breathed, awe overriding his fear. You infused it. Now try to withdraw the energy. She focused again, need it back. The golden light on the stone snapped out, and the incandescence retreated into her, leaving her exhausted, the lines of fire fading instantly. The second path is possible, Kaelen said, his relief immense. But that power? It's 1,000 times stronger than I anticipated. If you ever channel that power fully, Elara, you could incinerate this manor, myself, and the entire city block. You are a walking supernova. The sound of shattering glass suddenly echoed from the levels above. It wasn't loud, but in the vault's silence, it was deafening. The hunter has breached the main floor, Kaelen snarled, his eyes flashing with raw fury. Serafina is down. He's coming for the incandescence. He's coming for you. He turned to the exit, his vampire speed already preparing him for battle. He needed to buy her time. He was running towards a fight that even his ancient power might not win. Before he left, he looked back at Elara, his eyes lingering on the bite marks that were his claim and her curse. Stay here. Do not leave this room. Do not let your fire out or you will guide him directly to you. Kaelen, wait. Elara pleaded, the charm weakening momentarily under the fresh surge of fear for him. He was gone before she could finish the thought, leaving her alone with the heavy stone table, the cursed sarcophagus, and the terrifying knowledge that she held a power capable of ending the world, all while the man who needed her to live was running straight into a killer's embrace. The silence Kaelen left behind was a heavy, suffocating thing, broken only by the faint, muffled sounds of a distant struggle from the upper floors, the unmistakable clash of steel and inhuman strength. Elara knew Serafina was fighting the hunter, but Kaelen was likely already past them, moving to draw the aggressor away from the vault. The compulsion charm was beginning to fray. Her fear for Kaelen's life, the life that was now bound to hers, was a powerful organic emotion that the cold, chemical peace could not fully subdue. She felt the sudden, desperate urge not just to escape but to help. To use the fire Kaelen needed her to contain. He's in danger. His life is my life. This thought, which Kaelen had implanted to keep her still, was now the trigger for her rebellion. She looked around the vault. Kaelen had sealed the hidden passage with an iron-reinforced plank, secured by a complex lock. Escape was impossible without knowing the cipher, and she didn't have the time to decipher the archaic symbols. But she had the incandescence. She returned to the spot where she had successfully infused the stone. She closed her eyes, trying to recall the feeling of the fire, bypassing the charm's dulling effect. Instead of focusing on protection, she focused on force, the primal, destructive power Kaelen had warned her about. Break the seal. Get out. Find him. The energy rose up her spine, hotter and faster this time. It didn't just line her skin, it surged through her fingertips, a terrifying, concentrated beam of heat. She pressed her hands against the sturdy iron plank. The result was instantaneous and violent. The plank did not melt slowly, it superheated and exploded outwards in a shower of brilliant, incandescent sparks and shrapnel. The force of the blast threw Elara backward against the dais. She landed hard, the air knocked from her lungs, but miraculously the fire had not touched her. The iron was now a glowing, brittle shell, the elaborate lock reduced to a puddle of molten silver. She had done it. She had escaped the cage. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the throbbing ache in her back. The incandescence had receded, leaving her utterly drained, breathless, but free. She climbed into the exposed, rubble-strewn passage, the silence of the vault replaced by the tense quiet of the manor. She started upward, guided by instinct. She needed to reach the main floor. As she ascended, the air grew colder and the signs of struggle became more pronounced. A large section of the staircase railing was deeply gouged, as if hit by a freight train. On the landing she found a patch of dry, dark blood that was definitely not hers, and a discarded, silver-tipped dart. Then she saw Seraphina. Kaelen's lieutenant was slumped against a wall in a shadowed alcove, clearly injured but conscious, her breathing shallow and ragged. A deep, cauterized wound, a burn not a bite, scorched her side. Seraphina. Elara rushed to her side, instantly dropping to her knees. Seraphina opened her eyes, which were clouded with pain and fury. Foolish girl. Kaelen's charm is failing. Go back. The hunter. What happened to you? Elara ignored the warning, her focus solely on the immediate threat. Thorn is formidable. He bypassed my defenses using a crude, solar-infused weapon. It burns us, the cold ones, Seraphina hissed, gripping Elara's arm with surprising strength. But Kaelen intercepted him. Kaelen is leading him to the West Wing, a diversion. Where is the West Wing? Irrelevant. You must get out of this manor. Use the tunnel beneath the garden statues. Don't fight them, Elara. You are not ready. I can't leave him. You said the hunter wants to extinguish my fire, but Kaelen needs it to live. Elara argued, the compulsion to protect him now absolute. If Kaelen dies, I die anyway, consumed by the curse he can no longer fight. Sentiment will get you killed, incandescent, Seraphina snarled, but her gaze held a grudging respect. If you won't run, then hide. But take this. Seraphina fumbled with a silver locket hanging around her neck, a small, intricate piece of obsidian and silver. It carries a minor disruption charm. It won't cloak your fire, but it will make you harder to track for a short time. Now go. The distraction won't last. Elara took the locket, the cold silver shocking against her skin. She looked at the lieutenant, an uneasy alliance forged in shared danger. Thank you, Seraphina. Don't thank me. I am securing the survival of my lord, even if it means cooperating with his damn addiction. Elara rose, her resolve hardening. She moved past the injured Seraphina and began to run up the main staircase. She wasn't running away, she was running towards the conflict, towards Kaelen. As she reached the top of the stairs, she heard a sound from the depths of the manor that froze her in place. A deep, terrible roar, not of pain but of raw, predatory rage. It was Kaelen, losing control, the incandescence that was supposed to save him now driving him to the very edge of the madness the sorceress had cursed him with. The hunter had pushed him too far. Elara's own incandescence flared in response, the orange-gold lines visible under her collar. She knew she had mere seconds before the hunter found her, or Kaelen, driven by desperate fury, came back for the only thing that could stabilize him. Her blood. Elara burst onto the main floor, the heavy oak doors of the central hall gaping open to reveal chaos. Chandeliers were shattered, velvet drapes were ripped, and two ancient marble statues lay in ruins. The scent of ozone and stale blood hung heavy in the air. She saw him immediately. Kaelen. He was locked in a brutal hand-to-hand fight with the shadow hunter, Marcus Thorn. Thorn was faster than any human she had ever seen, using his agility to dodge Kaelen's devastating blows. He wasn't relying on stakes. He was using short, solar-infused daggers that burned Kaelen's skin wherever they connected, hissing on contact. Kaelen, in turn, was a whirlwind of black leather and terrible strength, his eyes glowing brighter than before, the crimson overlaid with a frantic orange tint, a horrifying manifestation of his accelerating curse and the incandescence's overstimulation. He was fighting with an animalistic ferocity that chilled Elara to the core. "Your arrogance will be your end, Volkov." Thorn grunted, narrowly ducking a blow that splintered a nearby column. "You hoard the source of chaos. The incandescent must be purged. She is mine." Kaelen roared, his voice thick with predatory rage, the words barely human. He lunged, but Thorn slashed a dagger across his forearm. Kaelen staggered back, the wound smoking violently, his control slipping further. Seeing Kaelen's raw, undeniable pain shattered the last fragments of the compulsion charm in Elara's mind. She didn't think, she acted. "Stop." She ran into the center of the hall. The distraction was instantaneous. Thorn hesitated, his eyes locking onto Elara. Kaelen, momentarily stunned by her presence, stopped his attack. Thorn was lean, sharp, and covered in grime, but his eyes held an agonizing clarity. They weren't the eyes of a monster, they were the eyes of a fanatic, driven by deep-seated grief. "The source," Thorn whispered, his gaze fixed on the subtle glow radiating from Elara's neck beneath the obsidian locket. "You led me right to her, vampire. Now stand aside." Kaelen seized the moment of distraction. He grabbed Elara, pulling her behind him, shielding her body with his own. He was breathing heavily, the addictive scent of her blood now a roaring siren in his mind, but his protective instinct was still paramount. "You won't touch her, Hunter," Kaelen spat, the crimson in his eyes battling the hungry orange. "I won't just kill her," Thorn corrected, raising his dagger. "I will liberate her from the chaotic power that is consuming her soul, the same power that destroyed my family. I'm doing the world a favor. The incandescence is not yours to judge." Elara cried out, stepping out from behind Kaelen. She focused on the fire, but this time not for destruction. She channeled the fierce, protective thought, deflect. She raised her hands, and the incandescence didn't burst outward. Instead, it formed a shimmering heat haze shield between her and Thorn. Thorn lunged, throwing his solar dagger directly at Elara. The dagger hit the heat barrier not with a clank but with a soft, high-pitched ping. It instantly de-energized, its silver blade turning dull and cold before clattering harmlessly to the stone floor. Thorn stopped, his expression a mixture of shock and cold calculation. He hadn't expected the incandescent to have any control at all. Kaelen, seeing her spontaneous defense, felt a momentary surge of clarity. The fire had protected them both. He needed to secure their survival through strategy, not just brute force. "Thorn, listen," Kaelen began, holding a protective arm around Elara's shoulder. "I know your goal. But you are wrong about the incandescence. It is not an uncontrollable force of nature, but a weapon that can be controlled. I am working to stabilize her. If you kill her, the raw, unbound power will not vanish. It will detonate, leveling this entire region." This was the betrayal Kaelen had warned her about. He was twisting the truth, making her seem like a strategic weapon he was ready to deploy. Thorn hesitated. "A detonation? A convenient lie, Volkov." "A risk you are not willing to take," Elara interjected, holding Kaelen's gaze and playing the terrifying role he had thrust upon her. "He is dying, Hunter. I am the only cure for the curse that binds him. If you want to kill me, you will have to deal with a truly unrestrained, desperate vampire lord, one whose sanity is rapidly dissolving. Or you can agree to an alliance." Thorn lowered his guard, his eyes moving between the terrified yet resolute mortal and the vampire lord who was visibly struggling to maintain control. "An alliance? With a vampire?" Thorn scoffed, but the fury in his voice had lessened. "A temporary truce," Kaelen corrected, his voice dangerously low. "You seek to extinguish the incandescence safely. I seek to control it for my own survival. We both need Elara to live long enough to understand her power. We stop fighting now and we work together to find a way to stabilize her before she becomes the catastrophic force you fear." The offer was repulsive yet logical. Thorn stared at Elara one last time, measuring her terror and her strength, before slowly sheathing his remaining dagger. "I agree to this temporary arrangement, Volkov. But understand this, if she shows any sign of losing control, if that fire becomes unstable, I will not hesitate. And if I find out you are using her power for anything other than stability, I will put a silver stake through her heart first and then yours." Kaelen nodded curtly, the agreement a bitter pill. He had saved them both, but at the cost of inviting his most dangerous enemy into his home. The hunter was now an unwilling guest, and Elara was caught between the vampire who needed her to live and the hunter who believed she must die. The forced alliance had begun. The library in the Volkov manor had been converted into a tense, temporary lab. Marcus Thorn, the man sworn to eradicate incandescence, sat across a massive oak table from Kaelen, the man obsessed with preserving it. Elara sat between them, the unwitting subject of their terrifying collaboration. Seraphina stood silently by the door, nursing her wound and glaring at the hunter with undisguised venom. Thorn was meticulous. He examined the residual energy in the objects Elara had touched, trying to quantify the destabilizing ripples Kaelen had warned him about. Kaelen, meanwhile, pored over the ancient Volkov scrolls, searching for a ritual that could anchor Elara's power without destroying her humanity. The air was thick with mistrust, but it was in these long, silent hours that Kaelen's internal conflict reached its zenith. He watched Elara. She was tired, her strength sapped by the day's events. Yet she was not broken. She was trying to read one of the ancient texts, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked ordinary, a mortal woman in a cold, extraordinary prison. Kaelen realized the chilling shift in his feelings. In the alley she had been a fix, a desperate means to an end. In the vault she had been a key, the solution to his curse. But now, seeing her resilience, her defiant kindness, and the way she had faced down the hunter not with a scream, but with a spontaneous act of self-defense for him, something ancient and deeply buried within Kaelen had stirred. It was no longer just thirst. If I were cured tomorrow, he thought, if the curse was lifted, would I let her go? The answer, swift and agonizingly clear, was no. He didn't just need her blood, he needed her presence. Her fierce, human spirit was a light in the centuries of his darkness. The silence of the manor no longer felt empty when she was near. The chill of his immortality was lessened by her fire. He had grown accustomed to her scent, not the addicting metallic smell of the incandescence, but the simple, faint scent of her skin, her shampoo, her life. He wasn't fighting for his longevity anymore. He was fighting for the right to keep this specific, incandescent mortal by his side. He had promised her protection through a lie, the compulsion charm, and she had responded by defying the hunter to protect him. It was a terrible, beautiful irony. His internal turmoil was momentarily interrupted by Thorn. The resonance is fluctuating, Thorn announced, his voice sharp. Her emotions are spiking. She's worried about you, Volkov. Is this how you control her? Through emotional manipulation? Kaelen met the hunter's cold gaze, his face impassive. I told you she is bound to me. I need her stable to control the fire. Now stick to your analysis, hunter, or this arrangement ends, and the power imbalance shifts permanently. Thorn backed down, but his skepticism lingered. Elara looked up, catching Kaelen's eye. She didn't see the addiction now, she saw the intense, protective vigilance of a creature utterly dedicated to her survival, a survival that meant his life. Kaelen, she asked softly, what happens when we find a way to anchor the fire? When I can control it perfectly? The question was a direct challenge to his newfound realization. If she was safe, he had no objective reason to keep her. The compulsion charm was barely holding. Her human heart was too strong. He stood and walked toward her, ignoring Thorn and Seraphina entirely. He knelt beside her chair, putting them on the same level. Then Kaelen said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register that was raw with a confession he hadn't yet named, we will have succeeded. And the world will still be outside waiting to claim you. But you will have gained the strength to make your own choice. And I pray, a silent, desperate whisper in his ancient soul, that you choose to stay. He reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. It was not the touch of a predator, but the hesitant touch of a man deeply in love, a feeling he hadn't processed in nearly 1,000 years. The incandescence responded not with a fiery surge, but with a warm, steady glow beneath her skin, a sign of mutual acknowledgement. Thorn watched the exchange, a look of profound, troubled disgust settling on his features. He saw the shift too. The monster was not just feeding, the monster was caring. And that, to the hunter, was perhaps the most dangerous form of corruption. The alliance had entered a perilous new phase, complicated by the very thing Kaelen had sworn off centuries ago, a human heart. The fragile truce in the library was brutally interrupted by the arrival of an unwelcome visitor. A chill descended upon the manor that had nothing to do with Kaelen's presence. It was the heavy, perfumed cold of high-status vampire magic. The massive door to the library swung open without warning. Standing in the doorway was a figure of sleek, predatory elegance, Lord Valerius. He was the head of a rival equally ancient clan and Kaelen's long-standing nemesis. Valerius wore silks and a bored expression, flanked by 2 armed guards. "Kaelen, my dear Volkov," Valerius purred, stepping into the room. His eyes, the color of cold emeralds, swept over the chaos, the broken columns, the scorched walls. "Rumors of your indisposition are usually just wishful thinking, but the state of your ancestral hall suggests a serious domestic mishap." His gaze finally landed on the occupants of the room. Kaelen, rigid with fury, Seraphina, instantly drawing a hidden blade, Marcus Thorn, the shadow hunter, standing openly with his hand on a stake, and Elara, the unassuming mortal at the center of the storm. Valerius stopped, his expression hardening as he took in the strange tableau. "A hunter in your employ? And a mortal sharing your chambers? This is beneath you, Kaelen. Surely your needs haven't deteriorated this far." Kaelen stepped forward, shielding Elara. "This is a private matter, Valerius. You will leave my property now." "Private?" Valerius scoffed, his gaze suddenly fixed on Elara. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the faint golden-orange shimmer that pulsed at the base of her neck, a residual effect of her incandescence. A slow, chilling smile spread across his features. "My word," he breathed, his voice dropping to a new, dangerous pitch. "Is that what I think it is? The incandescence. The chaotic heart, the fabled source of pure elemental fire." Kaelen knew the game was over. Valerius wasn't just a rival. He was a collector of powerful magical artifacts and knowledge. And he had instantly recognized Elara's identity. "She is nothing," Kaelen growled, taking a possessive step closer. "A simple mortal with a mild, chaotic alignment." "Harmless. Harmless?" Valerius laughed, a brittle, cruel sound. "Kaelen, you have a hunter inside your home, the blood of your loyal lieutenant on the floor, and your own power fluctuating like a dying star. She is anything but harmless. She is a weapon." Valerius approached Elara, his movements swift. Before Kaelen could intercede, Valerius's hand shot out. He didn't touch her, but instead snapped his fingers sharply just inches from her face. The sudden noise, coupled with the profound emotional stress of the encounter, was the perfect trigger. Elara gasped. The incandescence, already volatile, flared uncontrollably. The golden lines raced across her skin, brighter and hotter than ever before. The air around her instantly crackled, and a small, delicate vase on the table behind her spontaneously combusted into a pillar of shimmering, golden flame. The effect on Kaelen was immediate and terrible. The raw power so close flooded his senses. His eyes became pure, blinding orange, and a deep, guttural sound of desperate need escaped his throat. He looked at Elara not with love, but with pure, ravenous thirst. "You see, Thorn?" Valerius mocked, ignoring Kaelen's struggle. "The Volkov curse has found its perfect mistress. A power source that simultaneously strengthens him and drives him mad. And now you see the true nature of the beast, Elara. He doesn't love you, he desires your destruction." Valerius retreated, signaling his guards. Such a powerful anomaly cannot be left in the hands of a dying clan lord. The Elder Council must be informed. This incandescent host is a danger to the masquerade, and I believe, Kaelen, she should be placed under my protection. Kaelen fought the urge to lunge at Elara, his internal beast roaring for the release her blood offered. He focused all his agonizing willpower on Valerius. "You will regret this, Valerius. If you lay a hand on her, I will end your line." "An empty threat, Kaelen. Your control is barely a threat. Enjoy your final moments of sanity," Valerius smiled, a serpent tasting victory. "I shall return with the council. And when I do, I will be taking the cure, and the weapon, from your hands." Valerius and his guards vanished as swiftly as they had appeared, leaving a shocked silence and the scent of burnt roses in their wake. Kaelen stood rigid, trembling, his eyes still burning with a dangerous light. He slowly turned his head towards Elara, his face a chilling mask of pure, unadulterated need. The compulsion charm was shattered. The hunter was an enemy again. And the beast was awake. "You need to learn control," Kaelen finally choked out, his voice rough with suppressed violence. "Or you will be the death of us both, Elara. The death of my mind and the death of your soul." The urgency was a palpable, suffocating weight in the air of the manor's massive, deserted ballroom. Valerius's threat was a ticking clock. The Elder Council would arrive within days to seize Elara. Kaelen had no choice. He had to accelerate Elara's training. The ballroom, with its high ceilings and thick stone walls, was the safest place for volatile power practice. Marcus Thorn stood at the far end, silent and watchful, an executioner waiting for a mistake. Seraphina was stationed at the door, her healing wound a constant reminder of the cost of failure. "We have no time for caution," Elara Kaelen said, his voice stripped of emotion, focused purely on survival. He looked tired, the curse's shadow deepened by the strain of suppressing his addiction. "Valerius forced your fire out through shock. We must learn to channel it through will." He set up a series of ancient, enchanted clay jars across the polished wooden floor. "These are shielded. I want you to focus the heat, the incandescence, into the jars. Not to destroy them but to infuse them with controlled heat. Like charging a battery. Start small." Elara closed her eyes, the feeling of the fire now less a burning and more a vibrant, terrifying organ in her chest. She remembered Kaelen's words, "Think of need. Think of what you desperately want to protect." She focused on Kaelen. On the desperate need to keep the shadow of the curse from him. On the strange, fragile love that had bloomed between them despite the blood. She pointed a trembling hand towards the first jar. A thin, silvery golden current shot from her fingertips. It hit the jar and instead of exploding, the clay began to glow with a deep, controlled orange light. "Good," Kaelen breathed, a flicker of genuine hope in his eyes. "You contained it. Now the next one. Increase the volume." Elara repeated the exercise and the second jar glowed brighter. The third even more so. She was learning quickly, her human resilience adapting to the inhuman power. The secret was not fighting the fire, but accepting it as a part of her will. But the physical toll was immense. After the fifth jar, the incandescence retreated violently, leaving her dizzy and weak, collapsing into Kaelen's waiting arms. Thorn spoke for the first time, his voice cutting and critical. "She's burning out. You're pushing the vessel past its limit, Volkov. If the host dies, the fire detonates." Kaelen ignored the hunter, gently holding Elara. "You're doing well, little fire. But you must learn to refuel. The incandescence draws from your life force. You are expending your mortality faster than you can replenish it." He looked at her, his crimson eyes intense. The addict's thirst was there, undeniable, but now, it was tinged with something complex. Sympathy and necessity. "You need energy," Kaelen whispered, pulling her close. "And I need stability. This is why we are bound." He gently brushed his lips against the bite marks on her neck, a tender, possessive gesture that made Elara shiver. He didn't bite. Instead, he channeled a tiny, controlled trickle of his own power, cold, ancient vampire energy, into her bloodstream. The effect was instantaneous. The cold power met the chaotic heat, and Elara felt a brilliant, agonizing snap of stability. Her dizziness vanished. Her strength returned, invigorated, along with a terrifying surge of Kaelen's own protective obsession. "His energy stabilizes your volatility," Thorn observed, a note of grudging realization in his tone. "The curse and the incandescence are two sides of the same elemental coin. They need each other for balance." "A perfect, monstrous symbiosis," Serafina muttered under her breath. Kaelen pulled back, looking at Elara, whose eyes were now clear and blazing with renewed, focused incandescence. "You feel it? We are not just predator and prey, Elara. We are anchors. We stabilize each other." For the next hour, Elara trained relentlessly, using Kaelen's occasional controlled infusions to anchor her power. She learned to create shields, to focus light, and even to subtly repel physical force, making her body temporarily untouchable. During a break, while Kaelen was consulting an ancient diagram, Elara approached Thorn. "Why do you hate this power so much?" she asked quietly. "Not just me but the incandescence itself." Thorn finally lowered his guard, his gaze distant and pained. "The first time an incandescent appeared in my bloodline was over a century ago. A child too young to control the heat. A local vampire lord tried to use him just like Volkov is using you. The boy lost control. He didn't just burn the vampire. He burned his entire village. My great-grandmother was caught in the detonation. It was indiscriminate, chaotic, total destruction. The incandescence doesn't save souls, Elara. It demands sacrifice." His confession hung in the air, a stark counterpoint to Kaelen's desperate optimism. Just as the sun began to set, Kaelen called for an end to the session, his exhaustion now mirroring Elara's. He looked at Thorn. "The Elder Council will be here tomorrow night," Kaelen declared. "They will try to use the most powerful binding ritual in their possession to strip Elara of the incandescence, which will kill her. We need an answer tonight." He looked at Elara, the love and the desperation warring openly on his face. "We need to understand the curse entirely. Because the answer to saving you, Elara, lies within the darkest secret of the Volkov line. It's time I told you the rest of the truth." Kaelen led Elara deeper into the manor's oldest wing, away from the watchful eyes of Thorn and Seraphina. They stopped in a small hidden study that smelled of mildew and dried herbs. Kaelen sealed the door with a complex flick of his wrist, plunging the room into near-total darkness, illuminated only by a faint eerie blue light emanating from a single dusty portrait. The portrait was of a woman, beautiful, fierce and strikingly similar to Kaelen, but her eyes instead of crimson, were a shocking, chaotic gold. "The sorceress who cursed my line," Kaelen stated, his voice flat. "Her name was Lyra. She was not just wronged by my ancestor, she was my ancestor's mate." Elara gasped softly. "Your mate? But you said she cursed your line because of a betrayal." "The ultimate betrayal," Kaelen corrected, walking closer to the portrait. "Lyra was not human. She was the very first incandescent host of this era. My ancestor, Lord Kaelen Volkov, loved her fiercely, but he was also consumed by the Volkov ambition, power above all. When he realized Lyra's incandescence would make him the most powerful vampire in history, he performed a binding ritual, not to stabilize her, but to trap her essence and use it as a perpetual source of energy." He paused, the silence heavy. The ritual worked. Damien became impossibly powerful. But Lyra, in her final moments of life and fury, used the trapped incandescence to weave a counter-curse. She tied her chaotic power to the Volkov bloodline itself, transforming it into the terminal consumption I am now afflicted with. Kaelen turned from the portrait, his face etched with centuries of guilt. "The curse is not just a wasting sickness, Elara. It is the incandescence's revenge. It demands that the Volkov air slowly burns out unless they find a way to stabilize the chaotic energy outside the body. Lyra ensured that my ancestor could never have the power without the penalty of self-destruction. But what does that have to do with me?" Elara whispered, finally piecing together the terrifying puzzle. "You," Kaelen said, walking to her, his movements slow and deliberate, "are not just a random incandescent. The texts describe Lyra's essence as seeking its opposite. Her power, now bound to my curse, calls out for a new, pure host to anchor it. My bite, which initiated the curse's final decline, was the exact catalyst needed to summon and bind the incandescence to you." He took her hands, his touch cold but anchoring. "Elara, you are the reincarnation of Lyra's elemental power. You are the second incandescent host. You are the physical embodiment of the cure, but you are also the object of the curse's desire for redemption or destruction." The truth was a profound shock. She wasn't a victim of chance, she was a target chosen by fate, woven into the deepest tapestry of Kaelen's dark family history. Their blood connection was more than predator and prey, it was destiny. "So if I stabilize the fire," Elara asked, her voice trembling with the magnitude of the truth, "if I learn to control it, what happens to your curse?" Kaelen's crimson eyes darkened with a raw, agonizing truth. "Lyra's curse demands the incandescence be anchored outside the Volkov line. If you achieve perfect control, if you become the master of the fire, the curse will be broken. I will be free of the wasting sickness." He dropped her hands, unable to maintain the contact as he delivered the ultimate confession. But Lyra's fury had one more condition. The power cannot be simply released. If the incandescence is successfully anchored, the Volkov heir who breaks the curse will be rendered mortal, stripped of his immortality, his strength and his long life. Elara stared at him, the compulsion charm utterly destroyed by the shocking weight of this shared fate. "You mean, if I succeed you will become human?" "I will become Elara's age," Kaelen confirmed, a single agonizing word. "Vulnerable. Mortal. And subject to the natural cycle of life and death, which means losing you again in a few decades. The ultimate sacrifice for the ultimate freedom. That is the price of the shared scar." Elara felt the incandescence surge within her, not out of panic but a profound, protective empathy. She looked past the monster and saw the tormented man, so desperate to live that he was willing to trade eternity for a few precious, mortal decades with her. She walked towards him, ignoring the danger, and placed her hand over his heart, which still beat with a slow, powerful rhythm. "We are bound, Kaelen. By the curse, by the fire, and by the blood we've exchanged. If my survival means your mortality, then that is the price we will pay together. But first we fight Valerius and the Council. We fight for our right to choose that fate." Kaelen brought his hand up to cover hers, his gaze fierce with a renewed, desperate determination. The shared secret had not separated them. It had sealed their bond, turning the addiction into a profound, mutual destiny. They were no longer prisoner and keeper, but two people fighting an ancient fate. The Volkov Manor's grand ballroom was transformed. No longer a training ground, It was now draped in funeral silks and illuminated by cold, silver candelabras. It was a stage set for a terrifying political drama. Kaelen had issued an urgent summons to the Elder Council, the secretive ruling body of the vampire world, and they had arrived, chillingly swift. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of ancient power and blatant hostility. The council, 3 figures cloaked and hooded, radiating judgment, sat on a raised platform. Valerius, sleek and victorious, stood to their side, whispering insidious counsel. Kaelen stood at the center of the floor, his back straight, his coat impeccable, hiding the internal turmoil. Elara stood beside him. She wore a gown Kaelen had provided, deep crimson velvet that emphasized the pale, vulnerable curve of her neck. Seraphina stood a respectful distance away, while Marcus Thorn lurked in the shadows of an archway, his hand never far from his silver weapons. Lord Volkov, the central counselor's voice was dry, ancient, and utterly devoid of mercy. You stand accused of 3 grave violations: harboring a shadow hunter, neglecting the masquerade, and, most crucially, possessing an incandescent host. I possess nothing, Kaelen stated, his voice ringing through the silent hall. I have merely contained a dangerous anomaly to prevent a regional catastrophe, an act necessary for the preservation of your world. A convenient claim, Valerius interjected, his voice smooth as oil. The incandescence is the stuff of legend, volatile and corrupting. Lord Volkov seeks to claim this ultimate weapon for himself, using it to cure his lineage's wasting sickness. Consequences be damned. Kaelen turned to Elara, his eyes meeting hers, a look that communicated both his love and the dangerous role she was about to play. Elara Vance, Kaelen announced, pulling her gently forward. The host is stable, thanks to the controlled symbiosis we share. Her power is not uncontrollable chaos, but a potential force for balance. He looked directly at the council. I propose she be placed under my permanent supervision, as her incandescence is intrinsically linked to the Volkov curse. If you try to remove her, the subsequent catastrophic release of energy will violate the masquerade far beyond what you fear. The council remained unmoved. The rules are absolute, Volkov. The incandescent must be bound and contained in the high vault, stripped of its life force until the element fades. And she dies, Kaelen challenged, his voice rising. And if she dies, the power detonates, Valerius's claim notwithstanding. You are betting the city on an ancient, unproven ritual. Valerius seized his opportunity. Enough games, Kaelen. I have a solution. A ritual of neutralization. It will bind the incandescence to a non-sentient artifact, preserving the power while removing the dangerous host. The trap snapped shut. Valerius produced a shimmering silver orb from his cloak, the neutralization orb, a relic of immense power. I petition the council to allow me to perform this binding now, Valerius declared. The host lives, the power is neutralized, and the chaos is removed. The central counselor nodded slowly. The petition is granted. Valerius, proceed. Kaelen knew this was the worst possible outcome. The neutralization orb didn't stabilize the power. It drained it entirely, ripping the incandescence from Elara's soul in a painful, fatal process. He had to stop it. No. Kaelen roared, his self-control snapping. He lunged toward Valerius, but Valerius's 2 guards moved with blinding speed, interposing themselves between the lords. Elara. Kaelen yelled, fighting desperately, run. But Elara stood her ground. She knew running would only result in Kaelen being overwhelmed and her being captured anyway. She had to fight, right here, right now, with the power she had trained to control. Valerius approached her, the silver orb gleaming ominously. A shame, little fire. You would have been a beautiful power source. As Valerius raised the orb, Elara focused on the one thing stronger than fear, the shared scar. She channeled all the love and the desperation she felt for Kaelen into her power. She didn't seek to destroy, she sought to repel. A brilliant, pulsing dome of golden light erupted from her body, surrounding her in a protective incandescent shield. The heat was instantaneous and severe. Valerius recoiled, his face twisted in shock and pain, unable to penetrate the barrier. The silver orb, an item of anti-magic, briefly flickered under the overwhelming elemental force. The chaos Elara created was Kaelen's opening. Thorn, seeing Elara's control, realized the vampire's lie was necessary. He emerged from the shadows not to stake Elara, but to clear Kaelen's path. If she's chaotic, I'll be the judge. Thorn yelled, firing a specialized wooden dart at the council platform, disrupting the vampire's concentration. Kaelen, freed from the guards by Thorn's interference, turned his full, terrible attention on Valerius. The fight for Elara's life had begun, a chaotic, three-sided battle in the heart of the Grand Ballroom. The Grand Ballroom devolved into chaos. Kaelen, fueled by a terrifying cocktail of fury and the Incandescence's overstimulation, fought Valerius and his guards with brutal efficiency. Elara maintained her shimmering golden shield, pushing Valerius back with waves of controlled heat. Marcus Thorn the Hunter was everywhere. He wasn't targeting Elara or Kaelen. He was strategically disrupting the Council and Valerius's line of attack. He threw smoke bombs infused with deterrent herbs, temporarily blinding the Council, and drove his specialized stakes into the floor, not to kill, but to anchor the Council members' attention. During a brief moment of cover behind a broken statue, Elara saw Thorn reload his wrist-mounted crossbow. "Why are you helping us?" she demanded, the heat shield shimmering around her. "You want me dead?" Thorn didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on Valerius's movements. "I told you, Elara, I want the incandescence contained. But I also want justice." He turned, and the cold fury in his eyes was replaced by a profound, agonizing grief. The chaos that erupted with the first incandescent, the one that destroyed my great-grandmother's village, was not an accident. That incandescent, too young to control his power, was driven mad by a vampire who was trying to bind him to an artifact. Just like Valerius is trying to do with you now. He pointed his crossbow at Valerius, who was struggling against Kaelen's furious assault. Valerius's ancestor wasn't just present at that disaster. He was the one who performed the binding ritual that failed. He caused the detonation that killed hundreds, including my family members. The revelation landed with the weight of ancient stone. Valerius's family was responsible for the very tragedy that defined Thorn's mission. "I hunt incandescence because the uncontrolled power kills indiscriminately," Thorn continued, his voice low and intense. "But I hunt Valerius's line because they use that power to achieve their sick ambitions, then hide their failures behind the deaths of mortals. I will not let him execute his ancestors' mistake on you, Elara. Not again." Kaelen, hearing this, sent a concentrated blast of telekinetic force that slammed Valerius into a wall. He looked at Thorn, a silent, grudging acknowledgement passing between the vampire lord and the hunter. Their alliance was no longer just strategic. It was fueled by a mutual enemy and a shared history of betrayal. The Elder Council, temporarily disrupted, began to reorganize. The Central Counselor raised his hand, and the ancient vampire power converged, attempting to crush Elara's incandescent shield. The pressure was immense, causing the golden light to flicker violently. "Elara, pull back," Kaelen yelled, rushing towards her, but he was intercepted by Valerius, who had recovered and now fought with the zeal of a cornered serpent. Elara gritted her teeth, pushing against the overwhelming force of the Council. Her training kicked in, she focused on the anchor, Kaelen's presence. She needed stability and she needed it now. She reached out, grabbing Kaelen's hand over Valerius's shoulder, creating a direct circuit between the incandescence and the Volkov curse. The instantaneous exchange was a shockwave. Elara felt a massive surge of cold, strengthening power. Kaelen felt a torrent of stabilizing heat. The incandescence flared violently, not just a shield, but an offensive wave of chaotic golden fire. The wave hit Valerius first. He screamed, his silk attire instantly disintegrating, his body smoking as the fire's raw element tore into his ancient vampire form. The wave continued toward the Council platform. The three cloaked figures were hit with the force of a supernova. They didn't scream, they simply vanished, their ancient power unable to withstand the raw, focused element. The ballroom fell into an absolute, ringing silence. Valerius lay a smoking, defeated mess, and the Council was gone, their judgment deferred by elemental fire. Elara stood, breathing heavily, the golden glow slowly receding. Kaelen stood beside her, his body momentarily revitalized, but his eyes were wide with a terrifying realization. "You didn't just repel them, Elara," Kaelen whispered, his voice shaking. "You nearly incinerated them. You touched the raw edge of the chaotic fire. It was too much." He looked down at his own hand, which had briefly glowed with the power. He had tasted the ultimate strength and the taste was dangerously addictive. The cost of victory was a terrifying glimpse into the abyss of Elara's uncontrolled power, and the sudden realization that their fight for freedom had only just started the countdown to a final, inevitable confrontation. The silence that followed the Elder Council's defeat was not a peace, but a dangerous vacuum. Valerius was gone, reduced to ash by the incandescence, and the Council had been forcibly dispersed, but the cost was dire. Kaelen was standing at the precipice of madness. Elara's powerful surge of incandescence had done two things. It had saved them, and it had injected a catastrophic dose of raw elemental energy directly into Kaelen's system. The stabilizing heat momentarily reversed the curse's decay, but it also awakened the beast within Kaelen, the addict, the predator demanding the perfect fix. He was trembling, his eyes pure, violent orange now, the crimson of his vampire nature totally consumed. He looked at Elara, and the love, the shared scar, the respect. All of it was momentarily erased by a need so overwhelming it was physical torture. "Kaelen," Elara whispered, terrified. She saw the change. He wasn't looking at his salvation, he was looking at his prey. "The power," Kaelen choked out, his voice a low, terrifying growl. "It is magnificent. It burns the rot. I have not felt this strong in 5 centuries. I need more." He lunged, not with strategy, but with the raw desperation of a man starved for his ultimate drug. Elara barely had time to react. "Seraphina. Thorn. Help." Elara cried out, retreating quickly. Thorn, who had been watching Kaelen with cold vigilance, sprang into action. He was trained for this, the moment a vampire lost control. He threw a specialized silver net infused with wolfsbane, hoping to slow Kaelen down. Kaelen roared, tearing the net apart with brute force, but the brief entanglement bought Elara a critical second. Seraphina was too injured, leaning against the wall, but she managed to shout a warning. "Elara. He's not trying to stabilize you. He's trying to drain the source. Use the cold." Kaelen pinned Elara against the stone wall, his strength crushing. His fangs extended, gleaming wickedly in the dim light. His breath, hot and frantic, ghosted over the bite marks. "Just a little more, little fire," he hissed, his eyes reflecting the deep, consuming hunger. "We can rule. We can be unstoppable." Elara could feel the incandescence surging, ready to defend itself, ready to incinerate him. But she couldn't. She loved him. She couldn't kill the man who had shown her his deepest wound. She focused not on heat, but on the cold that Seraphina had mentioned, the ancient, stabilizing core of his vampire power. "His power stabilizes mine. I must stabilize his." She closed her eyes, channeling her incandescence not outward, but inward, focusing the brilliant, hot energy on the tiny traces of Kaelen's blood that still circulated within her from his controlled infusions. She created a concentrated point of elemental balance within her own bloodstream. Just as Kaelen's fangs grazed her skin, Elara slammed her hands against his chest, sending a controlled, concentrated burst of that stabilized, balanced energy directly into his heart. The effect was instantaneous and agonizing for Kaelen. It wasn't pure heat that burned him, but a terrifying jolt of elemental neutrality. The incandescence fought the curse, but it also fought the addiction, forcing a brutal clarity. Kaelen recoiled with a guttural cry of pain and confusion, clutching his chest. The orange in his eyes receded violently, replaced by the familiar, horrified crimson. The primal beast was beaten back, replaced by the Lord who remembered his love and his fatal choice. He looked at Elara, his chest heaving, his face a mask of self-loathing. His hands were shaking violently. "Elara," he choked out, his voice raw with remorse. "I almost took too much. I almost destroyed everything." Thorn lowered his crossbow, his expression grim. "That was close, Volkov. Too close. You were minutes away from becoming a monster no one could stop. Your curse isn't just killing you, it's amplifying your darkest instincts." Kaelen didn't respond to the hunter. He looked only at Elara, his hand trembling as he reached out to gently touch the curve of her neck, inches from where his fangs had nearly ripped into her. "We need to end this, Elara," Kaelen whispered, pulling her into a desperate, protective embrace. "The price of my freedom is my mortality. But the price of this addiction is your life and my sanity. We must complete the training. We must choose the former. It's the only way to save us from my own darkness." Elara hugged him back, shaking but resolute. The confrontation had been terrifying, but it had solidified her purpose. She was the one who controlled the fire, and she was the one who had to save him from himself. She had to become the master of the incandescence, even if it meant sacrificing his eternity. The brief, desperate embrace ended, leaving Kaelen and Elara raw and shaken in the ruined ballroom. Thorn and Seraphina watched them, recognizing that the emotional connection was now the most volatile component of the entire scenario. "We have to leave the manor," Thorn stated, his voice flat with urgency. "Valerius may be ashes, but his clan will retaliate immediately. They know what she is and what you need her for, Volkov. They'll come in force." "They won't get through the lower wards," Seraphina countered, struggling to stand upright. "But we are exposed. Kaelen, we must retreat to the deep sanctuary. Let me rally the remaining guards." No time, Kaelen decided, his gaze intense. If we retreat, we are trapped. We need to strike where they least expect it, outside. Suddenly the manor groaned. It wasn't the sound of settling stone, it was the sharp, grinding noise of ancient magic being violently peeled away. The massive, iron-bound doors of the ballroom shuddered under a tremendous, concerted magical assault. Too late, Thorn spat, leveling his crossbow. They're here. Not Valerius's clan but the enforcers, the council's military arm. They aren't here to negotiate, they're here to burn. A deafening crack reverberated through the hall as the doors disintegrated into splinters. Standing in the doorway were 24 heavily armed, elite vampires, clad in black, armored with enchanted steel. Leading them was a vampire of immense, cold authority, wielding a staff tipped with a shimmering anti-incandescent crystal. Lord Volkov, the leader, intoned, his voice synthesized and cold. By decree of the Elder Council, you are stripped of your title. The incandescent host is to be contained and neutralized. Surrender the mortal immediately. Over my dead body, Kaelen growled, stepping forward, his ancient strength surging. A simple solution, the enforcer leader replied. He raised his staff, and a wave of pure, chilling shadow magic shot towards Kaelen. Kaelen intercepted the blast with his telekinesis, but the force was overwhelming. He was slammed backward, crashing into the dais, momentarily stunned, the shadow magic biting deep into his cursed flesh. Elara screamed his name. She saw the dark, corrosive magic consuming his essence, and she felt the corresponding weakness in her own soul. The incandescence was his anchor, the curse was now weakening that anchor. He is dying. I must save him. She looked at the horde of enforcers, at the anti-incandescent crystal they wielded, and she knew her controlled fire would not be enough. She had to use the full, unbound power the supernova Kaelen had warned her about. The power that would strip her of her human consciousness. Elara closed her eyes, letting go of all fear, all caution, and all humanity. Fire. The surge was agonizing. It wasn't a gentle bloom, it was a violent, elemental eruption. The golden light that burst from her was blinding, radiating intense heat that instantly evaporated the moisture in the air. The incandescence raced across her skin, not in lines, but in a complete, seamless shell of brilliant, white-hot light. She was no longer Elara Vance, the student. She was the incandescent host, a creature of pure, destructive element. The enforcers screamed. The heat was unbearable, turning the air around them molten. The armored vampires, creatures of the cold, recoiled in agony as their enchanted armor began to melt and fuse to their skin. The power was so intense that the enforcer leader's anti-incandescent crystal staff shattered with a sharp pop. Elara raised her hands. The incandescence obeyed, releasing a concentrated, directed wave of pure energy. The enforcers were hit by a blast of atomic-level heat. They didn't burn, they simply ceased to exist, their forms dissipating into smoke and cinders, leaving behind only the scent of scorched earth. The entire horde was wiped out in 10 seconds. Elara stood alone in the center of the hall, the silence profound and absolute. She was wreathed in white fire, untouchable, magnificent, and terrifying. But when Kaelen staggered to his feet, pulling the shadow magic from his flesh, he saw the ultimate cost. Elara's eyes, once clear and human, were now 2 pinpricks of inhuman, blank gold. Her expression was serene, utterly composed, and completely empty. The incandescence had saved him, but in doing so, it had finally burned away her soul. She had lost her mortality and with it, her humanity. Elara? Kaelen whispered, taking a hesitant step towards her. She didn't respond with a word or a smile or a touch. She simply looked at him, the creature who was her anchor, her opposite. She was fire and he was cold. And the terrifying symbiosis had just consumed the woman he loved. The enforcers were vanquished, but the victory was a horrifying tragedy. Elara stood in the middle of the ballroom, wreathed in the receding white gold fire, her expression empty, her humanity consumed by the overwhelming elemental power. Kaelen rushed towards her, ignoring the pain of the shadow magic. Elara, look at me. Stop. Pull the fire back. He reached out, but the residual heat was so intense it forced him back. The incandescence was now autonomous, a force of nature no longer controlled by a human will. It recognized Kaelen as its anchor, but it no longer recognized him as its love. The ultimate danger wasn't over. The massive burst of power Elara had unleashed was a beacon, a flare visible across the supernatural plane. They had mere moments before more powerful forces, drawn by the catastrophic energy spike, arrived. Thorn watched, his face grim. She's lost. The chaos is complete. We need to neutralize her before the detonation. He raised his crossbow, aiming a silver-tipped stake at Elara's heart. No. Kaelen roared, intercepting Thorn's aim with a desperate, telekinetic blast. She is not dead. She is bound to the element. I can bring her back. We have to get her to the vault. But as Kaelen moved towards Elara, the incandescence pulsed defensively, pushing him away. The fire needed him close for stability, but it wouldn't allow the danger of the Volkov curse to contaminate its pure form. Seraphina, leaning against the splintered doorway, watched the agonizing stalemate. She saw her lord, the ancient vampire she was sworn to serve, teetering between his love for the woman and his addiction to her power. She saw the host, now a beautiful, terrifying vessel of destruction. And she saw the inevitability. Kaelen would not abandon Elara, and Elara's power would incinerate them both before they reached safety. Seraphina knew what had to be done. The Lord must be preserved, and the host must be anchored. She pushed herself off the wall, ignoring the searing pain of her wound. She walked slowly, deliberately, towards the dais where the shattered council had been seated. "My Lord Kaelen," Seraphina called out, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the silence. "The host must be moved. You cannot touch her." "I can." Kaelen looked at her, confused. "How, Seraphina? The fire will consume you." "The oath," she stated, her eyes locking with his. "I am bound to your blood, your line, and your cursed essence. My existence is already a derivative of the Volkov curse. The incandescence may be chaotic, but it is bound by the rules of its own magic." She reached beneath her armor and pulled out a small obsidian dagger, a relic of the Volkov line, used for ancient rituals of allegiance. "The ultimate loyalty," Seraphina whispered, looking at Kaelen one last time, a tear of cold, red blood trailing from her eye. "To save the Lord from the curse and the man from his addiction." Before Kaelen or Thorn could stop her, Seraphina plunged the obsidian dagger deep into her own heart. The death of a powerful vampire is not quiet. As her life force rushed out, Seraphina channeled her entire remaining vampire essence. Her strength, her ancient coldness, her loyalty, and focused it all into one final, massive wave of cold, stabilizing power. The wave of cold energy hit the incandescent host. Elara, wreathed in fire, absorbed the entire, devoted shockwave. The effect was instantaneous. The white-hot fire around Elara snapped out. The golden eyes flickered violently, and then, with a profound gasp, she collapsed to the floor, the inhuman light receding entirely. The power was not gone, it was anchored deep within her, stabilized by Seraphina's selfless sacrifice. Kaelen rushed forward, horrified, kneeling beside his fallen lieutenant. "Seraphina, what have you done?" Seraphina's body was already turning to ash, her consciousness fading. But she managed a final, weak smile. "I protected your future, my lord. The incandescence is now stable. You have a chance at mortality. Do not waste it, for her." And then she was gone, leaving only a pile of fine, dark ash and the obsidian dagger. Kaelen was devastated. He looked from the pile of ash to Elara, who was breathing shallowly, the incandescence now dormant, the humanity partially restored. Seraphina's final act had given them a fighting chance. "She gave her life to stabilize you," Kaelen choked out to the unconscious Elara. "We will not let her sacrifice be in vain." He gently lifted Elara's limp body into his arms. Thorn, his crossbow lowered, looked at the remnants of Seraphina with grudging respect. "The truce holds, Volkov," Thorn said, his voice quiet. "She's stable. But the enforcers will send a more lethal force now. We need to complete the mission. Neutralize the curse, or you will have sacrificed everything for nothing." Kaelen carried Elara's limp, quiet body through the hidden tunnels beneath the shattered manor. Marcus Thorn moved silently behind them, his crossbow still loaded, his vigilance tripled. Seraphina's sacrifice had bought them stability, but the final, terrible choice still loomed. They reached the hidden exit, a crumbling mausoleum in the deepest part of the Volkov cemetery. The moonlight, cold and indifferent, illuminated the decaying stone. Kaelen gently placed Elara on a low stone bench. Her incandescence was dormant, her skin pale, but her eyes fluttered, showing the first signs of her humanity returning. Thorn stopped at the entrance, blocking their path. He lowered the crossbow, but his stance was uncompromising. "This ends here, Volkov," Thorn stated, his voice quiet but final. "Seraphina died to stabilize her. But stability is not a cure. The incandescence remains bound to her soul. She is still the potential for the ultimate chaos." Kaelen turned, his crimson eyes blazing with exhaustion and grief. "You saw the truth, Hunter. You saw my curse. You saw her fight to save me. We have a chance at mortality, a chance to break this curse forever. And what then? Thorn challenged, his gaze hardening. You become human, you live a short, quiet life, and she remains a walking supernova, one emotional trigger away from leveling the continent. I cannot allow that risk. You only care about the risk because of your own scarring past. Kaelen snapped, dropping all pretense. You seek to extinguish the fire not because it's evil, but because you equate it with your ancient pain. I am offering a permanent solution. Anchor the fire, break the curse, and the incandescence can be rendered safe. And if she fails to anchor it? Thorn pressed, taking a slow step forward. If that chaotic power breaks free again? It's too large a gamble. I swore to protect the balance. And the only way to ensure the balance is to remove the anomaly. Thorn raised the crossbow, aiming not at Kaelen, but directly at Elara's heart. I will do what Kaelen Volkov is too addicted, and now too much in love, to do. I will end the threat. Kaelen roared, a primal sound of fury, and moved with a speed that defied his recent struggles. He lunged at Thorn, his fangs bared. The confrontation was brutal. It was not a magical battle but a desperate, mortal brawl, ancient vampire strength against hunter agility and skill. Thorn was deadly, using silver darts and specialized strikes to exploit Kaelen's vulnerability to the shadow magic. Kaelen, driven by pure, protective despair, fought with the ferocity of a creature protecting its mate. The sound of the struggle, the thud of bodies hitting stone, the metallic scrape of silver, jolted Elara fully awake. She watched, horrified, as the two men who had fought over her, for her, and with her, now fought to the death. Kaelen was powerful, but the shadow magic and the recent loss of control had weakened him severely. Thorn struck true, landing a paralyzing blow to Kaelen's side with a silver-tipped dart. Kaelen staggered back, clutching his wound, his face contorted in agony. Thorn seized the opening, spinning around and reloading the crossbow, aiming again at the semi-conscious Elara. Forgive me, Incandescent. It is for the greater good. No. Elara screamed, forcing herself to sit up. She felt the incandescence stir, but it was weak, exhausted by the immense discharge. She had a terrible choice. Let the power surge out, which would kill Thorn and trigger another catastrophic loss of her humanity, or remain powerless and watch Thorn kill Kaelen's only hope for a future. She focused not on the fire but on neutrality. She threw out her hand, channeling the minimal energy she had left, and focused it on the battlefield itself. A small, contained pulse of incandescence shot out, hitting the ground between Thorn and Elara. It didn't explode or burn. Instead, it created a flickering wall of pure, blinding golden light, a curtain of element that separated the hunter from his target. Thorn stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the sudden, powerful glare. He lowered the crossbow. Elara's control was back, subtle but effective. She had not chosen a side. She had chosen balance. Thorn, Elara said, her voice weak but firm. I choose the risk. I am the vessel and I choose to fight for the anchor. If you kill me now, the incandescence will be unbound chaos, and you will have failed your family's memory. She looked at Kaelen, who was slowly recovering, his face a mask of love and pride. If you let us live, Kaelen will attempt the ritual to break the curse. If we succeed, the fire is stable and Kaelen becomes mortal. The risk ends. Thorn hesitated for a long, agonizing moment. He looked from the fiercely protective Elara to the weakened Kaelen, then back to the blinding wall of neutral fire. He saw not chaos but choice. With a defeated sigh, Thorn slowly lowered his crossbow completely. The power is stabilized, he conceded, the words heavy with defeat. And the choice has been made. I will not violate the will of the incandescent host. But if this ritual fails, Volkov, I will be the one to clean up the mess. I will be watching. Kaelen nodded, his gaze unwavering. The final confrontation was over. They had won a temporary reprieve, secured by Elara's newfound control and Seraphina's sacrifice. Now only the final, perilous ritual remained. The mausoleum was cold and silent, a sanctuary of stone where Kaelen finally prepared for the ritual of mortality. Elara, still weak but fully human again, helped him prepare the few necessary materials: ancient charcoal, a vial of his purest blood, and the obsidian dagger Seraphina had used. Thorn stood guard outside, his presence a constant, silent pressure. Kaelen knelt before the stone bench, taking Elara's hands in his. His face was resolute, the internal battle finally over. There is one final truth, Elara, Kaelen began, his gaze steady. I have searched every scroll for a cure for my addiction. A way to consume your incandescence safely without becoming the beast. There is none. The curse is absolute. Elara's heart ached. The curse demands your mortality to break the chain. We knew that, Kaelen. It demands more than that, he corrected, his voice heavy. Lyra's magic was not merely vengeance, it was a demand for acknowledgement. The incandescence cannot be simply used or cured. It must be accepted. I have spent centuries trying to fight the curse, to find an external solution to my decay. He looked into her eyes, the crimson dark with the magnitude of his surrender. But the addiction itself is the final component of the curse. I don't need a cure for the thirst, Elara. I need to accept the fire as part of my existence. If I try to break the addiction and the curse, I will fail. The ritual will tear my essence apart. So what must you do? Elara whispered. I must perform the ritual while still fighting the addiction, Kaelen explained. I must force myself to accept the fire's presence. Your presence, not as a fix or a weapon, but as a permanent, essential force in my life, even as it strips me of my power. He picked up the obsidian dagger. The ritual requires me to sever the magical link between the Volkov curse and my immortality. It is a moment of immense vulnerability. When the link is cut, the incandescence will surge. It is the final fulfillment of Lyra's demand. At that moment, Elara, you must be ready. To anchor the power, Elara finished, her eyes fixed on his. To contain it so it doesn't leave my body and cause the detonation Thorn fears. Yes, Kaelen confirmed. Your control must be absolute. You must focus your will not on defending me but on defending yourself, on creating the perfect, impenetrable boundary between the incandescence and the mortal world. You must become the master of the fire, accepting the power for what it is, your soul's new destiny. They knelt facing each other, the small, circular arrangement of charcoal complete. Kaelen picked up the vial of his blood and carefully poured a small stream onto the obsidian dagger. This is the point of no return, Kaelen said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate promise. If I fail, the curse consumes me, and my final act will be a beast's final desperate attempt to drain you. If you fail, the incandescence detonates. We choose mortality, Elara. We choose a fragile, dangerous but real life. He pressed the bloody dagger to his palm. Elara placed her hands over his, the familiar heat of her incandescence beginning to stir. Kaelen took a deep breath, focusing all his centuries-old will. He ignored the gnawing, predatory hunger that roared for Elara's blood. He ignored the shadow magic attempting to consume his core. He focused only on the acceptance of the incandescence, the acceptance of his fate, and the love that had emerged from the addiction. With a swift, agonizing motion, he drove the obsidian dagger into the ritual charcoal, severing the magical link. The change was instant and terrifying. Kaelen cried out, a sound of profound loss and terrible relief. His skin, for 1,000 years cold, instantly warmed. The veins beneath his eyes faded violently, the crimson light extinguishing with a hiss, leaving behind pale, human blue. The ancient power that sustained him was ripping away, replaced by the frail, fragile warmth of mortality. Simultaneously, the incandescence raged. It burst from Elara's body, a column of white-hot, furious energy attempting to escape its vessel. It was the culmination of the curse, the ultimate discharge of power demanding freedom. Elara seized control. She didn't fight the fire. She opened her soul to it, welcoming the searing heat, accepting the incandescence as her own. She focused her will, not to expel but to anchor the power, to forge an impenetrable wall between the element and the world. The column of fire raged for a single, terrifying moment, threatening to incinerate the mausoleum. Then, with a profound, rushing sound, it snapped back into her body. The incandescence settled. It didn't disappear, but it was now contained. Elara's eyes held a steady, brilliant golden light, but they were no longer blank. They were filled with conscious human will. She was the master of the fire. Kaelen collapsed, breathing raggedly, his body weak and utterly human. The vampire was gone. The man remained. Elara looked down at him, then at her own glowing hands and finally at the door where Thorn was waiting. The curse was broken. The fire was anchored. They had won their fragile freedom, secured by Kaelen's sacrifice of immortality and Elara's acceptance of her destiny. The silence in the mausoleum was the sound of a new beginning. Kaelen sat on the cold stone, breathing shallowly, no longer the ancient vampire lord, but a mortal man in his late 20s, weak, vulnerable, and profoundly exhausted. His eyes were the fragile blue of a clear morning. Elara knelt beside him, her incandescence dormant beneath the surface, but her presence was a steady, contained source of warmth. She was the master of the fire, her humanity restored, yet marked forever by the power she had accepted. Marcus Thorn stepped into the mausoleum, his crossbow lowered completely. He surveyed the scene, Kaelen now mortal and Elara stable. The resonance is gone, Thorn stated, his voice devoid of hostility, replaced by a quiet awe. The incandescence is anchored. The chaotic ripple has ceased. You succeeded, Volkov. You chose to sacrifice eternity for a human life. Kaelen managed a weak smile, reaching up to touch Elara's cheek. It wasn't a sacrifice, Hunter. It was a choice. My addiction is broken not by abstinence but by acceptance. I accept my mortality and I accept the fire that defines her. Elara squeezed his hand. And I accept my destiny, Kaelen. The incandescence is a part of me now. I am not human, but I am not just an element. I am the anchor. And what now? Thorn asked. The Volkov clan will not accept a mortal lord, and the council's remnants will hunt the anomaly until their last breath. The council is dispersed and the Volkov manor is compromised, Kaelen decided, the remnants of the strategist still present. But I still hold the power of my assets. We will disappear. I will use the remaining Volkov resources to vanish from the supernatural grid. We will trade this ancient, cold empire for a quiet, warm life. He looked at Elara, his blue eyes filled with a love that was fragile because it was finally real. You will teach me how to live again, Elara Vance. How to age, how to feel the sun, how to be just a man. And you will teach me how to manage the incandescence, Elara replied, her hand moving to the small, cold comfort of the obsidian locket Serafina had given her. The fire is ours now. We control it. We use it to protect our future. Thorn watched the exchange, the vampire and the incandescent, bound by a power that had nearly destroyed them. His mission was complete. The chaos was contained. He knew he couldn't kill them now, but he also couldn't trust them completely. I will not hunt you, Thorn said, turning to leave. But understand this, my oath is to the balance. If that fire ever breaks free, if the chaos returns, I will find you, Kaelen. And next time I will not hesitate. Kaelen nodded curtly. Go, Hunter. The new balance demands vigilance from us all. Thorn disappeared into the moonlit cemetery, leaving Kaelen and Elara alone. Kaelen slowly pushed himself up, leaning heavily on Elara. He was weak, exhausted, but alive. He was mortal. He was hers. They stepped out of the mausoleum, the cold night air hitting Kaelen's newly warm skin. He turned to Elara, his face gentle. He didn't see the element of fire. He saw the woman who had sacrificed his eternity for his soul. He leaned down, no longer with the predatory hunger of a vampire, but with the simple, warm desire of a man. He kissed her, a soft, long, incandescent kiss. It wasn't the searing, chaotic heat of the first bite. It was a kiss of balanced fire and mortal warmth. It was the promise of a future, fragile and short, but fiercely real. The incandescence within Elara responded, not with a destructive surge, but with a gentle, controlled bloom. A faint, golden light enveloped them both, a silent testament to the curse broken and the destiny accepted. They turned their backs on the dark, shattered manor and walked toward the rising sun, the master of the fire and the lord of the mortal heart, vanishing into the human world. Their story of addiction, sacrifice, and dangerous love had finally found its fragile, beautiful end. 6 months later. The city was vast, but this small apartment in the West End was a sanctuary. The windows were open to the sound of traffic and the smell of rain, the ordinary, beautiful sounds of mortal life. Kaelen Volkov, stripped of his ancient title and his vampire strength, was now simply Kaelen. He stood by the stove, clumsily attempting to flip a pancake, the heat making him sweat, a simple human weakness he was still getting used to. He was weaker, slower, and easily bruised, but his eyes, the simple blue of a human, held a peace they hadn't known in 1,000 years. He failed to flip. The pancake landed crumpled on the floor. Elara Vance laughed, a clear, untroubled sound. She walked over to him, her movements fluid and confident. She was studying astrophysics again, but her true mastery was the element within her. Let me, she said softly. She didn't use her hands. She simply focused her will. A faint, contained golden shimmer enveloped the pancake. The heat was precise, controlled, and in seconds the crumpled dough rose, perfectly smooth, and flipped itself onto the plate. Master of the fire, Kaelen murmured, wrapping his arms around her from behind. He felt the constant, steady warmth of her incandescence, no longer a dangerous addiction but a safe, shared anchor. And you, Elara replied, leaning into his embrace, Lord of the mortal heart. You smell like cinnamon and humanity, Kaelen. I prefer it. They had paid the price. Serafina was gone, the manor was abandoned, and their past was ash. But they had gained something irreplaceable, A genuine connection unmarred by the thirst or the curse. They were free. But freedom in the supernatural world is never absolute. Kaelen's human heart suddenly pounded with a familiar, chilling rhythm. He looked out the window, past the street lights, to the roof of the building across the street. Standing there, a silent silhouette against the city lights, was Marcus Thorne, the hunter. He wasn't aiming a crossbow, he was simply watching. Thorne held a small leather-bound journal, an ancient Volkov text Kaelen thought he had destroyed. Thorne's expression was grim, a promise of eternal vigilance. Elara felt Kaelen's tension. She turned, her steady golden eyes meeting Kaelen's worried blue ones. She knew. He's watching, isn't he? She asked. He is, Kaelen confirmed. He is the new balance. And he will always be a reminder that my choice came at a terrifying cost. Then let him watch, Elara said, turning back to the stove. She was not afraid. She had faced down the beast, the council, and the curse itself. We are ready. We are anchored. Let the world come. She kissed him, a deep, warm kiss, the final incandescent kiss, a promise that their dangerous, passionate story was not truly over, but merely transitioning into a new, mortal chapter.